Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about sex-linked traits. You can see here we have a picture of the sex chromosomes, the X and Y chromosome. And you find an X and Y chromosome in a male and an X and X chromosome in a female. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what it means if a gene is sex-linked or a trait is sex-linked. So we've already discussed that males have an X and Y chromosome, females have two X chromosome, and it turns out that males and females also can differ in their sex-linked traits. So, genes on the sex chromosomes are called sex-linked genes. The Y chromosome genes in mammals are responsible for the characteristics of males. So, if you think about it, all humans have an X chromosome. Girls have 2, guys have 1. However, only guys have a Y chromosome. So as a baby, a little fetus is developing, they all start developing as a female. And if there's a Y chromosome present, at a certain point during development, the genes on the Y chromosomes get turned on, and that modifies that individual into a male. So Y chromosome is unique to males. Whereas the X chromosome, these are traits and genes that are not at all specific to gender. So if you think about it, everybody has an X chromosome, so they're not going to be unique to male or female. And here's just a Punnett square showing us the probability of having a male or female offspring, right? And as we can see, there's a 50% chance that an offspring will end up being female, another 50% chance that the offspring will end up being male. And maybe you've never thought about it. You think about which parent is responsible for determining the gender of the child. Well, females are always going to pass on an X chromosome, whether they have a daughter or whether they have a son. But male, the dad, can pass on an X chromosome. If the dad passes on an X chromosome, he's going to have a daughter. And if he passes on a Y chromosome, he'll have a son. So it's really the male that is going to determine the gender of an offspring. So if we take a look, here is an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And this image right here shows some of the genes that are on the X and Y chromosome. Now, it's not all of the genes. In fact, there's about 1,800 genes on the X chromosome. But what I want you to notice is that a lot of these genes that are on the X chromosome are genetic diseases, and they happen to be recessive genetic diseases. So if we look things like muscular dystrophy and deafness and color blindness and hemophilia, these are all genetic diseases located on the X chromosome. And one thing I want to just point out is that these types of genes, it's the recessive allele that actually causes the disease. And if we look at the Y chromosome is much, much smaller than the X chromosome. And there actually is about 78 genes on it. This one just points out 2 of the genes. Hey, and these are things like testes determining factors. And so these are things that would be unique in males. So only males would have these types of genes because they're located on the Y chromosome. So if you look at male mammals, they have an X and Y genotype. Okay, and this is somewhat of a problem because the males have only one copy of their genes, right? If you think about all the other genes, they got one set from dad, one set from mom. But for the sex chromosome, they just have one X and one Y. So if there's a bad copy, a bad version of the allele on that particular chromosome that they have, they're going to express it. So all of a male's sex-linked genes, they all get expressed, whether it's a good version of the gene or a bad version of the gene. So female mammals, on the other hand, they have two X chromosomes, right? Because they have the XX genotype. Okay? And so I think a good way to kind of look at this is look at an example in cats. And perhaps you've heard of calico cats. Calico cats have a unique coloring, right? In fact, their coloring is codominance. Okay? And we've already learned that, well, with codominance, that both of the alleles are dominant. So if we look, we can only ever have female calico cats, right? Because the female could have the dominant allele on one X chromosome and then a different dominant allele on the other X chromosome, and you get this multicolored cat, right? This is codominance in the fur that we see here. Okay, so we see in females, we can get the calico coloring. On the other hand, male cats are never calico, and the reason for that is because they only have one copy of the X chromosome. So they're either going to get one dominant allele here or the other one, because there is no allele for fur color on the Y chromosome. So male cats are only going to be solid colors, whereas female cats can have the calico coloring because this is a sex-linked gene. Right, so like we said, this is an example of codominance. And it's on the X chromosome, so only the females can be calico. Another example of sex-linked traits would be in fruit flies. Okay, it just so happens that eye color in fruit flies is a sex-linked trait. The eye color gene is on the X chromosome, and it turns out that this is simple dominance and recessive. The red colored eye is dominant, the white colored eye is recessive. Females have to inherit both of the recessive white alleles in order to have white eyes. Okay? Whereas a male, on the other hand, could have white eyes just by getting one copy of the gene, because remember, it's on the X chromosome and they only have one X chromosome. Okay, let's look at another example. Hemophilia. So hemophilia is a blood disease where when an individual is injured, so if you fall down and you cut yourself, usually, after you cut yourself, it takes just a few minutes and you bleed maybe a little bit, but your blood starts to clot and it scabs and it heals itself. But with hemophilia, as a person that has this genetic disease, if they start bleeding, they could just have a small cut and it can become life-threatening because their body doesn't respond and doesn't clot the blood correctly. So any fall could cause a person to bleed to death or cause a giant bruise where blood leaks out of the blood vessels. And it happens that this particular genetic disease is caused by a recessive allele. Right? It's also sex-linked, so that recessive allele is on the X chromosome. So this poor little guy right here, he does suffer from hemophilia, and he had a little fall, and unfortunately, he broke some blood vessels inside of his arm, and it's not, the blood vessels aren't clotting like they should, and so he has a lot of blood that's leaked out of the blood vessels and are swelling in his arm. So any fall, you have to go to the hospital because any fall could be life-threatening. So how do we actually write out? How do we do a genetics problem like this? So what symbols are we going to use? Well, in this case, because we're dealing with the X and Y chromosome, we're going to use those. Okay, and since we're dealing with hemophilia, we also need to pick a letter. So it doesn't matter what you choose, but try to choose something that makes sense. So for hemophilia, it makes sense if we pick H, and I'm going to pick little h because remember that hemophilia is a recessive allele. And then we can go ahead and put the H right on top of the X. So this right here would represent an X chromosome that's carrying the recessive allele for hemophilia. In females, there's going to be 3 possible genotypes. Okay? You could have an individual that has no hemophilia. You could have an individual that doesn't have hemophilia, however, does carry the allele for hemophilia. So remember, this individual, even though they carry the allele for hemophilia, themselves are not going to have it because they have a second copy of the X chromosome that has the dominant allele that prevents them from having hemophilia. And then you could also have a female that has hemophilia. So a female would have to have 2 copies of the recessive allele in order to actually have hemophilia. In males, it's a little more simple. And the reason for that is because the male only has 1 X chromosome. So males are either going to have the normal genotype, not with no hemophilia, or they're going to have hemophilia if they have a recessive hemophilia gene on their X chromosome. So much simpler in males. All right, so let's go ahead and try a practice problem out here. Let's go ahead and cross a non-hemophilic male with a female carrier for hemophilia. All right, so the first thing we'd want to do is write out our cross. So a non-hemophilic male would be XY, and then we're going to the genotype of the female, she's a carrier, so it would be XHX because she carries the gene, but then she also has another copy, another copy of the chromosome that doesn't carry the gene. Right? So we'll fill in our Punnett square just like we always do. Put one of the parents on the top, the other parent on the side. All right, and then we just go ahead and fill in the inside of the Punnett square, just like that. Okay. So because they only have 1 chromosome, it's a lot more likely that males will express a recessive X-linked trait, right? They only get 1 chance at getting the good chromosome, or I should say the good X chromosome. Whereas females, they get 2 chances, right? They're going to get an X chromosome from their dad and an X chromosome from their mom. So they have 2 chances to get a chromosome that has the normal gene that prevents them from having hemophilia. All right, so what I'd like for you guys to do is I'd like you to do this problem. So you should get out a piece of binder paper, okay, and you're going to do this problem. So in fruit flies, eye color is sex-linked, and red eyes are dominant to white. If a white-eyed female fruit fly mates with a red-eyed male, what percentage of the offspring would have red eyes? What are the chances of them having a red-eyed male offspring? So go ahead, in this problem, I want you to label the alleles, show the cross, complete a Punnett square, report the genotypic and phenotypic ratios, just like we always do, and then answer the 2 questions above. So you can go ahead and pause the video right now and go ahead and do that. All right, welcome back. So let's take a look in if we have some phenotypes. So it says if the phenotype is more common in males, the gene is likely sex-linked. So let's go ahead and take a look at this pedigree right here. All right, if we see here, we have individuals, right? The ones that are completely shaded blue have this particular genetic disease, which I believe is deafness. Okay, and we see here that we have a male that has it, a male that has it, and another male that has it. Okay, and then none of the females in this entire family, both the parental, the F1 and the F2 generation, got this genetic disease. So why is that? Well, it's because the females here, they have 2 chances of getting a chromosome that doesn't have the recessive gene for deafness on it. So if we look, right, this male right here married into the family, so there's no relation there. This female, right, she's a carrier. She got a copy of the recessive allele from her mom, but then she got another copy of her X chromosome from her dad, which doesn't have the disease on it. Okay, this individual right here, okay, we don't really know what she has, but we know that she doesn't have the disease, so she could be a carrier or she could be normal. This individual was a male, and if we think about it, he got a Y from his dad and got an X from his mom. So if this individual wanted to blame one of his parents, which that wouldn't be very nice, but if he blamed one of his parents, he inherited that recessive allele from his mother, right? Because his father gave him a Y chromosome. Same thing with his brother here. Okay, and if we look at their children, we see that this male, right, can pass on this X chromosome to his daughters, but as long as his wife isn't a carrier, it would be impossible for his daughters to actually get this disease because the mom would be passing on a good chromosome and the dad only passes on Y chromosomes to his sons. All right, so what I would like you guys to do is I'd like you guys to write a short paragraph and explain why males are more likely to have the disease hemophilia, right, which is sex-linked. And then if a son has hemophilia, who did he inherit it from? His mother or his father? Explain. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, take some time to go ahead and answer this question in paragraph form. Okay, should be 3 to 4 sentences minimum. All right, welcome back. All right, and that is the end of the video. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow in class.